Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending and registering for our next in a series of Learning Views webinars. We are glad to have you aboard today and listening in. We have some very interesting things to cover today. My name is David Amborski. I am the Vice President of Enterprise Learning for TrainingPros. Let me, for some of the new attendees and people that may not know TrainingPros, let me just cover real quickly who we are. We are a very specialized staffing company, and we're focused on doing learning and development and change management types of interventions with our clients. We have really three things that are differentiators for us is our expert relationship managers that we have that work with our clients and get to know our clients and are very close to understanding their business. We have a talent pool of very loyal consultants that we have worked with for many years that are highly specialized in the learning and training environment, and also in change management. And we have we use a very proven onboarding process to bring new people onto our staff that has been found to be very successful and proves to bring them on for long periods of time. When there's a lot of movement in the consulting industry, we pride ourselves on having lots of folks that stay with us and work with us. So if you have any questions about what we do and how we do it, I would invite you to contact us to learn more about our services. A little about myself. I have just joined TrainingPros in the last 6 months. I am a former retired partner from Deloitte and several other large firms, and have worked in the consulting industry for a long time. I am, as you will see when you listen to our speaker, Diane Young, today, I too am very passionate about helping people through the learning process, particularly in the industrial environment. My roots are deep in manufacturing, ran a manufacturing company, plant for the IBM company at one point, and understand the need for making sure that people have the right tools, the right skills, and the right knowledge to be able to do the things that they do in business. So very much a part of the learning environment in the industrial setting. Our talent really is distributed across the things that you see on your screen here. The one thing that's missing off of this screen, which is a new practice that I'm starting to develop, is called training as a service. And training as a service is pointed at companies that have done an ERP implementation, enterprise resource planning implementation like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, or Infor, and have been implemented a while and would like to upgrade their training and have somebody consistently look at their training materials to make sure that it's relevant. So that's a practice that we're adding. We're very excited about it. We do a lot of activity in taking stand-up courseware conversion to e-learning, a lot of instructional design and development work, and we also lean towards the organizational development, change management activities that are required in firms. So we have a very broad spectrum of services that we provide, and that includes also translation and localization of materials. So we're not just a English-based development company. We also can convert some of that stuff to other languages as well. Our partnership with Harrisburg University is a very good one and a deep one. We try to leverage our organizational experience with Harrisburg's academic expertise so that we can, and we're doing that through this series of webinars, and I'm trying to bring the latest trends in learning and development to all of you, to give you insight into what's going on in the industry. Um, we gained some valuable insights and thought leadership from not only the faculty at the university, but we also try to blend that with some of the experiences that we're seeing in the on the industry side as we deal with our clients. And it's given us a great format to be able to bring you some of the things that we see changing and some of the things that we see as trends in the industry. And we believe that those things are really important to all of you in staying abreast of those things and understanding what's next and what's coming next. Excuse me. We try to incorporate questions and best practices into the webinar chat feature that we have, and a lot of this stuff is woven into also some of the features on some of our other multimedia things that we present as far as our company goes. We do some other webinar series and some other broadcasts, such as an internet radio program that we broadcast every couple of months. So very important to the community and to all of you that we try to keep you abreast of some of those things. Let me introduce to you our speaker for today, Diane Young. Diane is known as an ideas person and a person who really takes those ideas and turns them into reality. So let me give you a little background on Diane. Okay, so she opened her first business during her college days, and since that time, she's created several, at least a dozen different successful companies. She's a former educator with Dale Carnegie Training. Her experience includes owning her own business coaching firm, where she worked with leaders and organizations in implementing strategic improvements and developing both themselves and their companies and their respective businesses. She is recognized for bringing out the best in people, both in developing performance skills and attitudes and morale. And Diane's an avid reader, and like us here at TrainingPros, she's a very passionate person about learning and the people side of business success. She's trained thousands of business professionals through the years and in varying industries, and provided career guidance to many of her clients. And some of her clients are include Microsoft, State Farm Insurance, AT&T, and many, many, many others. Please join me in welcoming Diane Young to our virtual podium. And she will be talking about the millennials in the workspace. And it's our pleasure to have you with us today, Diane.
Thank you so much, Dave. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to be here with you. And I think that over the course of about the next 45 minutes, hopefully you will gain a new perspective and you'll be able to walk away with a few things that will help with some of the challenges that we're all seeing in the workplace. So I hope that you have some fun. It's going to be very interactive, so feel free to use the chat pod. Raise your hand if you need to, but let's go ahead and jump in. So I call the multi-generations in the workplace actually the millennial merge. And my analogy that I use is all professionals know that generational issues exist in their offices, but a lot of times they just don't know what to do about it or how to pinpoint exactly what the issue is or how to fix it. So I relate it to the workplace today resembling a one-room schoolhouse. We've got all grades, K through 12, under one roof, and they're all just trying to figure things out. So this is the first time in history that we've had 4 generations working side by side. So let me ask you this. If you don't think generations make a difference, think of this example. So when we asked people to recall how and where Kennedy died, the traditionalists and the baby boomers would say, oh, it was gunshots in Dallas, Texas. Generation X would say, oh, it was a plane crash. I think it was near Martha's Vineyard. And the millennials or Generation Y might say, Kennedy who? So today, we're going to talk a little bit more about why we bring certain things to the workplace based on our birth year, and less about how to deal with each other. We're going to talk about why each generation behaves that they do and how that can affect and bring challenges into the workplace. But I really want you to walk away with some fresh ideas. So if you get one thing out of today, and only one thing, let it be this. There is no such thing as common sense anymore. And I know some of you may be laughing. There are times where multiple times a day I say to myself, isn't that common sense? But let me share the definition of common sense with you. So the definition of common sense is this: putting the pieces together using the knowledge that one already has, usually obtained by having actual life experiences, as opposed to sitting at a desk or in front of a textbook. So in order for common sense to be common, we need to have similar experiences that we've gained that knowledge from. With the generational gap widening, we have less and less similar experiences that we can learn from. So let me give you a couple examples of this. First of all, for all of my ladies, think about the first time that you put makeup on. How did you even know what to do? I know that my generation, we watched all the popular girls and our peers in school, and we kind of looked at their faces to see what they were doing. I was actually fortunate enough to have two older sisters. So when they left, I just went into their room and rummaged through their makeup and experimented with all of it at the same time. I'm sure the first few times I looked like a clown, but that's really where we had to count on our friends to really shoot it to us straight. Diane, way too much blue eyeliner, or lose the mood lipstick. So eventually I figured it out, but it was through trial and error. But think about this. If today's young girls want to learn to put on makeup, all they have to do is go to YouTube. There are more than 5.8 million tutorials on how to contour their face. Or they go to Sephora and they have a specialist that is there that can pick out the exact product they should use and show them exactly how they should use it. You see, we don't learn the same way anymore. So for my guys, how did you learn how to play football when you're a kid? You can't learn to block and tackle by playing video games, can you? So, today, teens can even take driver's ed online. So I personally feel that there are some things that you just can't teach or you can't learn by watching someone else. You have to experience it for yourself. I kind of tend to think that driver's ed and driving is one of them. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the younger generation, they simply just don't learn the same way that we did. Now, let me show you a study that Microsoft did in 2015. A lot of us that use technology all the time have probably noticed that the human attention span is dwindling. It's harder and harder to keep someone's attention. If you're in learning and development, you know that the trends are now these bite-sized micro learnings, because we just can't keep people in a classroom for an hour like we used to. So this study in 2015 says that the average human attention span in 2000 was 12 seconds. The average attention span in 2015 had dwindled to 8 seconds. And just to put this in perspective, the average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So hope that brought you a little humor and also put things in perspective for you. So now let's take a look at what we're dealing with. I mentioned that this is the first time in history that we have 4 generations working side by side. So I want to dig into each of the generations a little bit, and we're going to look at some of the characteristics of each group. And we're going to start out with our traditionalists. So traditionalists are now in their 70s and 80s. This will tell you some of the characteristics about them, but there are only about 3% of people in this generation that are still full-time employees. So one thing about this generation was that, by and large, this group was really grateful and appreciative for anything that they had. They were grateful to get a job, to get training, and maybe have the good fortune to climb the ladder and to get a better paying job. So their goals, for the most part, were really all about security, stability, and safety for their family. Now let's look at the next group. Next, we have our baby boomers. So baby boomers are now in their 50s to 60s. Baby boomers saw the world a bit differently than the traditionalists did. They said, okay, now wait a minute. If I work harder, I can have more. If I stay one extra hour, if I close one more deal, if I get one more thing done, I can make more money and provide a better life for my family. So it wasn't for greed, because very few baby boomers are actually driven by wealth, but it was really all about being able to provide a better life for their family. So my stepdad was one of 11. Do you think he ever got a new pair of anything? No, probably not. I know that at all times growing up, he shared a room with at least all 3 of his brothers. Talk about no privacy, no individual space. But when he got into the workforce, he was determined to work harder to provide for his family what he never had. So there's also a little bit of competitiveness with the boomers. So apparently it goes back to this rumor that I've heard that when they were kids, they only got trophies for first, second, or third place. Can you even imagine? They had to be a lot of kids with hurt feelings going home with nothing. But you can imagine that competitive nature that was really fueled by that environment of, hey, if you want to win, you've got to be first. You don't get participation trophies. So this is where that competitiveness came in with the boomers. So now let's look at Generation X. This is my generation. A few characteristics of each of them. Now, a couple of things that are important about Gen X. They really cross 2 important thresholds if we look at it from a workplace standpoint. The first one is that half of Gen Xers went to college right out of high school. So the workplace saw a huge influx of formal education at that time. And then the second one is that more than half of Gen X women went into the workplace right out of college or high school. So we also, at this time, saw a huge gender shift. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little fact that also played a huge part in the way my generation had influence. You might not believe me, but it's actually MTV. So yeah, I'm serious here. Okay, so we were the first generation that could watch music videos. Okay, we had cable TV, the first to have cable TV. So we were able to watch these music videos of successful people. We could see what they wore, we could see their hairstyles, we could see everything that was fashionable and in. So do any of you remember MTV Cribs? So it was a show on MTV, and it actually took you inside the homes of rich entertainers. It gave you a bird's eye view. You could see what cars they drove, the fashion, and just the luxury way they lived. It was kind of a newer version of Robin Leach, if you will. But not only did that influence the thoughts of the Gen Xers, but this was a time that for the first time in history, we started to see a generation that really cared about the image of being successful. So we saw brands like BMW and designer purses skyrocket because more and more Gen Xers wanted to drive the right car. They wanted to carry the right purse. So we started to see a new definition of what success looked like. So now let's take a look at the millennials. So the millennials are the exact same age group as Gen Y. So a lot of times people get confused, but if you're reading articles, seeing references, it's the same group. So another thing I wanted to point out is that there's no governing body that determines what years make up what generations. It's really all done by researchers. So I use the Bureau of Labor Statistics for all of my stuff because I really want to look at the workforce data. That's what I'm primarily most interested in. So what I want you to keep in mind as we go through the next portion of this webinar is that it doesn't really matter what birth year you were born in, because it's really more about your mindset. So Justin, let's go ahead and do a poll. I'd like to kind of get an idea of what you guys are currently facing in your workplace. So if you would, please vote. You can estimate, but how many of each generation are in your current workplace? Okay, still tallying. And keep in mind, traditionalists, only about 3% of traditionalists are still in the workplace, but I bet that most of us do still have someone in that generation at our workplace. Okay. Well, I think that gives us a pretty good idea. So it looks like we're pretty much spread across all of the generations, which again is why so many people have interest in the challenges between the generations. So I want to play a little game. We're going to have a little fun, okay? There are no right or wrong answers, but I want to play a game called How Millennial Are You? So I'm going to show you over the next few minutes here that really it is all about mindset and not birth year. So we are going to bring some polls out, and I just want you to answer yes or no to the polls. So Justin, let's go ahead and get the Millennial Game started. So the first question is, have you ever waited in line to buy cupcakes? Okay. Let's take a look at the next one. So the next poll is, have you ever taken a selfie? Be honest. Most of us have, haven't we? Okay. So now let's take a look at the next one. Have you ever referenced Wikipedia as a legitimate source for information? Excellent. Okay, what's next, Justin? If you read a good article, do you share it online? I know I certainly do. I send it, I text it to people, I share it online. Yes, most of us do. What's next, Justin? How millennial are we? Do you not know any of your best friend's phone numbers by heart? Now, I can remember my phone number from elementary school, but I honestly know very few people's phone numbers. Yeah, looks like technology has won with most of us there because we no longer need to memorize phone numbers, do we? Okay, so let's see what's next. Have you ever worn a slap bracelet? Be honest, yes. If you haven't, you'll know it because you're going, what the heck is a slap bracelet? Okay. What's next, Justin? Do you know what YOLO means? Let's see. How many people know what YOLO means? You won't be called on to tell us what it means. Looks like we're about split right down the middle on that one, Justin. Okay. What do we got next? How millennial are you guys? Could you recite the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song right now? In West Philadelphia, born and raised. How many of you got it in your head right now? Yes. So how millennial are you? Okay. The next one, Justin. Have you gotten rid of your landline phone? This is an interesting one. Okay, pretty much split down the middle, a little bit more on the no. They still have a landline, which is a little surprising. Usually when we do this, it's about 75-25. So, yep. Let's see what we have next. How millennial are you? Do you not read paper versions of newspapers anymore? Do you read it online? Do you read it on your phone? Yep. Okay. Let's see what we've got next. Have you ever binge watched streaming on Netflix? I know I certainly have. Especially on Netflix, where they put out a whole season at once and you just have to keep going until you get to the end, and then you have to wait a whole year until they put the next season out. So yeah, looks like we're 3/4 of us said, yep, we've definitely binged. And what is the last one, Justin? Do you feel lost without your smartphone? I know I certainly do, but there are times that I would like to lose it. Okay. Thank you, Justin, for sharing those polls with us. So if you answered yes to most of those questions, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a millennial mindset. Maybe you have kids like I do. When they wore a slap bracelet, I wore a slap bracelet. So I hope that I've illustrated that really it isn't about the year you were born. It's really just about the openness of your mindset. So maybe on some things you relate more to millennials, but maybe on other things you still have a very traditional viewpoint. So we are going to, sorry about that. We are going to look now at the actual numbers. So if we take a look at the numbers before we jump into the actual generations in the workplace, there are a few things that I want you guys to know. So first of all, most people know that the baby boomers were a huge cohort. The baby boomers were actually 80 million strong, which is why they were called the boomers, but they were huge. It was the biggest cohort that we had ever seen in our society up until this point. So another key thing to keep in mind is that this group is now retiring at a rate of 10,000 a day in the United States. So then we have Generation X. But what a lot of people didn't realize is that this cohort was only about half the size of the boomers at 45 million. So think about it this way. When Gen Xers got into the workplace, were they able to push back on their bosses and say, no, I don't want to wear that, or work those hours, no thanks, nope, can't stay late. No, they weren't even really able to have those battles or even those conversations. Some of them did and became entrepreneurs so that they could make their own schedule and create their own path. But most people in my generation, Gen X, tell me that pretty early on in their career, if they wanted to advance, they had to play the boomer game. So what else do you think, if you were in either of those generations, especially if you're Gen X, what else do you feel like the boomers taught us in the workplace? I know when I came into the workplace, most of my managers and peers and everyone, they were boomers. So what did they teach you? Yes, strong work ethic. Absolutely. Sacrifice, loyalty, nothing free in life. Absolutely. Yes. Pay your dues, respect authority, be reliable. Yes, you guys are absolutely right. So someone in one of the other groups said that you have to wear pantyhose. So no, no. Yes, you have to be tough skinned. So the Gen Xers, we actually became that generation that I sometimes call the pseudo boomers. Because if we start to look at it from a mindset and not a birth year, most Gen Xers took all of our cues from the boomers about professionalism and work ethic. So now let's skip to where we are today. The millennials, they are 80 million strong. We have not had a young professional cohort with this much strength in numbers for almost 40 years. So that's why you see so many articles and there's so much talk about millennials in the workplace, why they're driving people crazy and why don't they just fit in and why don't they just do what we tell them to do like the Gen Xers did. But see, the big thing is that we all need to keep in mind, in less than 2 years, the millennials are going to outnumber both the boomers and the Xers combined in the workplace. So let's go ahead and do one more poll, Justin, because I'd like to take a little temperature gauge and I'd like you to start thinking about your workplace in the next 5 years. So what will the demographics of your workplace or your team be 5 years from now? Have you ever thought about that question of what it will be? Do you have people on your team that you know in the next 5 years will be retiring, will be moving on? Okay. Pretty true to what the statistics say, that most of us will have more millennials than others. Yes. The number of millennials is 80 million. Okay, thank you for that, Justin. So now what I want to do is I want to talk about what are some of the issues on the table. These are the most common issues that we are seeing, the top 5 ways that we see again and again that there are differences and challenges between the generations in the workplace. So I'm going to dig into each one of these a little bit deeper. And I'm going to talk about why we bring certain behaviors to the workplace and not so much about the characteristics, which we already covered a little bit earlier. So first, let's talk about technology. Okay, so do me a favor, and I want you to think about when you were a little kid, as young as you can remember. So how did you listen to your favorite song over and over and over again? See, most boomers started with records. Records actually came out in about the 40s, so that's how they listened to music. Boomers may have had a record player, or they may have gotten favorite records for birthdays and Christmas and things like that. As they moved into high school, they may have asked for records for special events, but also they may have gotten a job and then they could buy their own records. They could go to the record store. So even into their 20s, the boomers were still listening to records. So that's one end of the spectrum. So now let's look at the millennial spectrum, which is the total opposite end. So by the time the older millennials were born around 1981, what was the new way that we were listening to music? Anybody know? It's actually cassettes. Yes, cassette tapes. Now, by the time that those same millennials were 10 years old, we had switched to CDs. And by the time they went to college, what do you think they asked for? Yeah, an iPod. So then, while they were in college, they were the first group to start illegally downloading music on Napster. It was the cloud. It was the first time that we could stream music from the internet. So think about this. Those were really the millennials' formative years, and they were forced to change over and over again. So you remember those big giant boom boxes? And then they got smaller and smaller and smaller until they got down to the size of like an iPod shuffle. So now we don't even need to buy a stereo because there's an app for that. There's an app for everything. So as long as we pay our phone bill, we can get any song, anytime, anywhere, can't we? So when we think about that in terms of the workplace, it's really no wonder that we have a different perspective on things based on our experience. I put a little bullet point up here because it's really important that when we think about technology in the different generations, that we keep in mind that we really equate our relationship with technology to our comfort level with change. So, for example, on one end of the spectrum, you have millennials saying, I'm not going to do the grunt work. This stuff should all be automated anyway. There's apps for that. There's platforms for that. Why would I still be needing to do this? And then on the other end, you've got some of the other generations saying, hey, we don't change just to change. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If this computer's program still works, hey, nothing wrong with it. Because let's be honest, it's not that much fun to learn a new computer program, is it? So I'm going to share with you some more spectrums, and keep in mind that there are really no wrong answers. I just want to share with you the millennial spectrum and a very traditional spectrum, because you're probably working with people that are at all ends of that spectrum today. So now let's take a look at authority. So I hear all the time, millennials have no respect for authority, no respect for the chain of command. So I was raised in a pretty conservative, strict household. My stepfather, who was past military, oh, and by the way, he was a bachelor for 15 years when he married my mom and got the bonus of 3 stepdaughters. So I ate what was on the table for dinner, or I didn't eat. If I left things laying around the house, they probably get thrown away. And I didn't tell my parents where I wanted to go. So I remember so many times sitting in my room thinking, oh, I cannot wait to be a grown-up and do whatever I want. Anybody ever think that? So now fast forward to when I had my own kids. I wanted to make sure they never felt that way. So my kids had a voice really early on in almost everything that our family did. Where do you want to go to eat? Where do you want to go on vacation? What do you guys want to do? So many Gen Xers like myself have similar stories. And I feel like we possibly have swung that pendulum in the other direction too far, because we've allowed our children to have a say-so in everything. So now, fast forward to when they enter the workplace. You can now see why they are shocked that not everyone wants their opinion, that they don't get a say in everything, because they've always had a voice in decisions. Let's look at balance. This is really about work-life balance. And if we think about it, the boomers and the Xers, we were really able to separate out personal from professional. The boomers will say, you know, I was taught right before you walk in the door for work, you leave that personal stuff at the door. So a lot of what that looked like was, you know, ding, I'm walking in the door to work. I'm here to work. I'm only going to work. I'm not doing anything else while I'm here but work. And maybe if my boss is nice enough today, he'll let me go at a reasonable hour. And then when I walk out the doors of work, I flip that switch. And now it's my personal life where, you know, I'm a wife, a sister, a friend, a church member, all of that. But we have a real game changer on our hands, don't we? It's called the cell phone, our smartphone. So I don't know about you guys, but it's really my personal and my professional platform all in one. I don't carry 2 separate phones, although I know a lot of people do. So let's think about it this way. 20 years ago, where did you have to be in order to work? Yeah, at your desk, at work. You had to be at work to do work. So if you came into your career during a point where you had to be at work and you weren't very accessible to anybody outside of work, unless they called the front desk like we used to do to my mom in the summer. Then it's no wonder that today we have a lot of leaders and managers still in the workplace who think that visibility equals productivity. And that's why I put this up here on the slide. They feel like they have to see you to ensure that you're actively working. A lot of misconceptions about work from home. How could you possibly be as productive at home? And they really want that visibility to ensure that you're working. So now, today, millennials' mantra is work smarter, not harder. I don't think that really we can even look at it as work-life balance anymore, because it's really all about work-life integration. There really isn't a time of the day where work shuts off and personal kicks in, or vice versa. So let's jump into loyalty. So this is really a tough one. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I have to say that most millennials don't know what loyalty looks like from a company standpoint. They've just never seen it. And I'm going to give you some reasons why I say this. So divorce peaked in the 1980s, and a lot of millennials saw either their parents, their best friend's parents, someone close to them split during those very formative years. And then in the 90s, the internet took over the corporate world. Globalization happened, and we started seeing company after company offshore, outsource, decentralize. It was the first time that we actually started seeing companies use downsizing for cost cutting. So during that time, millennials saw their parents lose jobs due to these economic times. And it no longer mattered if their parents got stellar reviews, because in a lot of cases, the company couldn't save them because it was whole departments that were being cut. So seeing these things as a child or a teen gave the millennials a whole different perspective when they entered the workplace. Do you really have my best interest at heart, or am I going to get cut because you need to better your bottom line? Also, here's part two of that. Millennials saw their parents, who had that commitment gene so deeply rooted in who they were, that they would stay at a company that they didn't like. They would work for a boss that they could not stand. So what do you think these parents told their children? Yeah, they came home and said, oh my God, life is too short. Don't be unhappy for too long. Well, the millennials took that and turned it into their own little mantra that you may have heard. And I asked you about earlier in the quiz of the game, YOLO. For anybody that doesn't know, YOLO stands for you only live once. And here's a little caveat. YOLO is just like Facebook or anything else. As soon as parents start doing it, it's not cool anymore, and then the kids stop using it. So, but it's really important to know what it means. So what it means to a millennial is if they don't like their boss, they're out. If they don't like the schedule, bye, gone. They're finding something different. If they don't like the expectations or don't agree with the rules, they're gone. So actually, I feel like the mindset has gone a little bit too far, and it's gone so far that it's not just the millennials doing this. We have people who leave because they just can't handle the hard stuff. They're just out. So I want to stop here because I feel like this is a huge opportunity. We've got to find some middle ground, and this is where a huge opportunity for mentoring lies within the workplace. So take the new hires under your wing and help them understand the difference between putting up with stuff and sticking it out through the hard times, because all of us need to stick it out through the hard times and not give up too soon. So next, I would like to talk about entitlement. You look amazing in that sense of entitlement. So millennials get stereotyped with this all the time, and it is somewhat true, but I'm going to explain again how they may have gotten this way. It's really a societal thing that's happened. It didn't just happen overnight, and it didn't just happen 20 years ago when millennial children of ours were born. It actually started more than 30 years ago. And you may be surprised to know that the biggest culprit is credit cards. Yep, credit cards. You see, In the 1980s, credit cards became mainstream for middle-class people to use for the very first time. Prior to the 80s, American households did not have credit cards. They didn't carry plastic. So what that meant is that for the first time, millennials had parents with access to more money than they made. If a company had a bad year and your mom and dad didn't get a bonus, well, they don't want the kids to suffer. It wasn't the kids' fault. So we'll just buy them the holiday presents, the Christmas presents, and we'll put it on the charge card and pay it off later. Or if you planned a trip to Disney for your family, but the company had a bad year, it's not the kid's fault. We'll just charge it and we'll pay it off later. So most millennials actually are used to getting what they want when they want. And so now it's translating into the workplace. So it's no wonder that they may ask or expect a promotion after 2 months. I deserve it. I know way more than I did 2 months ago. But understand that these really aren't the millennials' fault. They didn't do these things to themselves. They're really just a product of the way they were raised, just like every other generation. And a lot of times I will hear people say, you know what? I consider every generation to have new generations and old souls. So I have run into lots and lots of people that I would consider old souls that are in the millennial birth age, but they don't act like some of the typical millennials, or they don't have the characteristics. They're more traditional. So let's do another poll, Justin. Let's have some fun with this one. I would like you to provide an antidote from a recent work experience that made you either feel old or young by a member of another generation. And while you're thinking and typing, I'm going to share one with you. So I was creating a Word document, and one of my colleagues said, "Why do you have so many spaces in between your sentences?" And I said, "Well, I don't. I only have 2 spaces." And they laughed and they said, "Why do you have 2 spaces?" And I said, "That's the way I was taught, period, 2 spaces." And then they laughed. They said, "Oh my goodness. Oh, were you taught to type, were you taught word processing on one of those type things?" Typewriter? Yes. Yes. For any of you that don't know, I guess that it is now only 1 space in between. So, oh, that's a good one. Yes. Didn't have the Starbucks app and made the team wait for my order. I bet they couldn't believe it. Flip phones. Hey, nothing wrong with the flip phone. Oh, it's painful when some of the millennials don't know the greats, whether it's music or film. These are some great examples. Oh, yes. So now even PayPal is old school. Now they want it Cash App or Venmo. You know, the funny thing, oh, that's a good one. Your kids wanted you to teach them how to write in cursive. You've probably all seen that meme on the internet where they say we could all be in code if we just wrote cursive. So yes, good stuff. Okay, Justin, thank you for that poll. So now, what does all this mean and what do we do? So I just want to share a couple tips with you about what we can do to help bridge some of these generational gaps. The first one is communicate your expectations and don't make assumptions. Remember how I said that there's no such thing as common sense? So don't assume anything. Be very clear with what your expectations are, because I promise you, if you say show up for work on the first day with black pants, somebody is going to show up in leggings. And you are probably thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, those are not pants. And they're thinking, these are pants. They go from my waist to my ankles. They cover everything. They're pants. So keep in mind, there's no such thing as common sense. You have to be very clear about your expectations. The second thing that I would like to communicate with you is just to be mindful of how you thank and appreciate people. So we used to appreciate any job done over and above what was expected. But guess what all those participation trophies did to the millennials? Yeah. And they didn't give them to themselves, did they? So they are used to being praised for showing up, for being on time, and even just for trying. So they got recognized for that. So in the workplace, they may think on a Friday afternoon, I was here all 5 days of the week and no one even noticed. Not a pat on the back, not a good job, not a gift card, nothing. Now, we probably all have people on our team that don't show up on time every day and don't give 100% effort. They just go through the motions. So all I'm really asking you to do is think a little bit differently and recalibrate that appreciation meter and acknowledge a job well done, even if it is their job. And I know some of you are going, baloney, it's their job, that's what they get a paycheck for. But what happens in today's workplace if you don't say thank you, I appreciate you, or good job? Yeah, they're going to leave. So what does it cost you to say those things? It's free. So you don't have to give them gift cards. Just a simple thank you goes a long way, and it really does help to build trust among your team. So Justin, let's do one more poll, because I'd like to identify what you guys feel are the top challenges that you are seeing. What is your biggest challenge in the areas that we covered? Okay. Entitlement is a big one. And then we're kind of all over the place, with several people saying most of the above. So what I'd like to do is I'd like you to just challenge you to think about ways that you could be more effective in bridging that generational gap. I'm hoping that some of the things that we talked about today and some of the perspectives of the spectrum have helped you to realize why certain people may bring things into the generation. Let's go ahead and you can scoot that poll over. It looks like we're pretty much all over the place. This is the next question. I just want you guys, like I said, to kind of think about this. What are some things that you could do to be more effective? Well, I think that if I'll share a couple examples with you while you guys are, yeah, you can pull the poll over, Justin, that's fine. Some examples of ways that you could be more effective to bridge those gaps. Look for ways that you can mentor. I really like the idea of cross mentoring, where you would partner up people from different generations, and don't give them a set agenda, but just let them get to know each other. Give them a $10 Starbucks gift card and just ask them to set some time and get to know each other. What we usually find is that the generations find that it is equally important, and that they gain so much just from each other. It opens up that perspective. Encourage different generations to work together. So when you're putting together hire Diane, that you can absolutely do that. I will put my information at the end. Listen and ask questions. And also, I like this, find similarities. So I think that you can absolutely find things in common, coach them. And I think another thing that works really well, encourage them. You know, the generations, it's not a problem that's going away tomorrow. We already saw that, you know, the millennials are twice the size of Gen X, and the traditionalists are retiring at 10,000 a day. So we are not, this is not going away. So the sooner that we can figure out ways to bridge these gaps, the more productive we can remain in the workplace. So, and I absolutely agree, communication is key. So ask questions, listen, try things, assign people with more responsibility, have someone lead a team meeting from each of the generations. And I really, like I said, I really do like the idea of cross mentoring. So thank you for that poll, Justin. So I'd like to leave you with this. You don't have to tackle all of this, you know, today. Hopefully I have given you some ideas. Gen Z. So Gen Z is the generation now that actually my 20-year-old is Gen Z. I do have some information on that. If you want to email me afterwards, anybody that would like some information on Gen Z, I've not added them into our multi-generations in the workplace because most of them are, the oldest of that group would still be in college. So, but at the end, I will leave my information. I can definitely send you some information on that. But what I'd like to challenge you with is not to take it all on at once, but to think about some of the things that you've learned today and just try to think a little bit differently, try to lead differently. And if you only do one thing, just start somewhere. So I want to thank you guys so much. I think that there are lots of easy things that we can do to bridge this gap. And if you need more help, please reach out. I put my contact information on here. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Justin.
All right, Diane, thank you very much. I know that I learned a lot at this one, and I'm sure all of the participants did as well. So thanks everybody for joining. Be sure to reach out to Diane if you want to follow up with her. We did have a question about the PowerPoint slides. I'll check with Diane. The recording will be made available, and it will be on the TrainingPros website within a couple of weeks. So you will be able to have access to the recording. Thanks very much to TrainingPros for working with us, Harrisburg University, and thank you all for sticking around. Very sorry about the mix-up with the link at the beginning, but I'm glad we all got in here. If you can stick around for a few minutes, I'm going to put up some slides related to the technical aspects of the webinar. We take the feedback seriously for our continuous improvement processes, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. So hope everyone has a great day, and thanks for joining today.